All right, next up is ounce equivalents. Next slide. So we had a meeting earlier this year. We called a special meeting for childcare centers. You all might remember that. And we briefly talked about this ounce equivalence requirement. So for years, if you looked at the meal pattern requirement, where you had the grains listed, everything was listed in terms of slices. That rule has now changed. So now the rule is when we're serving grains, the serving sizes have to be in what's called ounce equivalents. So for the most part, as long as you keep it simple, this is a pretty easy requirement to follow. Now, the key to the ounce equivalents, and I'm sorry if I'm hesitating, I'm looking for a note that I thought I had. What an ounce equivalent is the amount of grain, and I'm probably going to say this wrong, but it's the amount of a product you need to get 16 grams of grain. I think that's how it's stated. And it might actually be on the next page. If I just butchered that, I'll fix it in a minute. So what this means is, depending on the product that you're serving, you're going to have to serve so many pieces of it. An example would be, if you look at the screen, cheese crackers. So in order to serve 1 ounce equivalent of cheese crackers, and think of this as the Cheez-Its, you would have to serve 20 of those. And you'll see on the meal pattern requirement, and it's posted on our menus, I think it's 1 ounce equivalent is the maximum you'll see for like the 6 to 12 month or 12-year-olds. And then I think it's half an ounce for below that. But again, it's listed in the meal pattern requirement, and you'll see it on our menus. So what's important here though is, depending on the grain product you're serving, this ounce equivalent will dictate how much of that you need to serve. And when you're serving things like crackers, it's pretty straightforward. It's just a quantity. So as long as you put the right quantity on the table, you're good. Do me a favor, go to the next slide, Erica. Where it gets a little bit more complicated is when you serve things like a bagel, right? So now, for things like that, there is a cheat sheet, and this is just a snippet of it shown on the page here. I think it's a 6-page sheet that's included as an attachment in the training email. And I have asked Tawana to get with our printer to see if we can get some copies of these printed up. I'd like to find a way to get them laminated. I mean, it's a lot of paper, it's be a lot of money, but I want to be able to put this cheat sheet in front of you all so you have it as a quick reference. But in the absence of us giving you something physical, you have access to it in a lot of different ways. So what this does is it takes a bunch of common products and tells you how much you need to serve to satisfy the meal pattern requirement, the ounce equivalent requirement. So for example, you'll see if you're serving a bagel and the label says that one bagel weighs at least 56 grams, then in order to satisfy the requirement for 1 to 5-year-olds, you would give them 1/4 of a bagel. And it's listed right here on the chart. And for 6 through 12 or 12 through 18-year-olds, you would give them a 1/2 bagel. So that cheat sheet is going to become your best friend. And again, it has a bunch of items there. Again, I think it's 5 or 6 pages long. So a lot of common things are there. Now, there is a tool to help you calculate how much to serve if you pick an item that's not listed on the cheat sheet. And included in the training email, there's a link to a USDA training video. So we got training within training. That video, if I remember correctly, is like 30 to 45 minutes long, but it goes into great details on how to use those self-calculation tools. So we're still trying to learn these tools ourselves. So what we're encouraging our providers to do is let's start with the cheat sheet. And if you do end up serving something that's outside of that cheat sheet and you need some help doing the calculations, we can help you with that. And I do believe I've seen a bunch of online tools where you can go in and I think I've seen at least one. You can type in a product name and the weight, and it'll spit out how much of that item you need to serve. So we'll make sure those tools are available to you, but start with that training video if you have any more questions.
I think that I do believe it's the food buying guide, or somebody has it, or all you got to do is open that up and do the same thing.
Okay. All right, so we published new menus a few months ago. Those new menus have the serving sizes in ounce equivalents. And if you can see the screen okay here, there is a snippet from the meal pattern requirement. So for 1 to 5 year olds, it is ½ ounce equivalent. And for 6 to 12, 12 to 18, it is 1 ounce equivalent. All right, so we just got to be mindful of those serving sizes. Now, this will be one of the things that we verify when we come out to do a site inspection. Meaning if, and by me, I mean, by we, I mean Karamu, state of Kentucky, state of Tennessee. So normally the state will just eyeball the plate to kind of see if you served enough. I can promise you when they come out and inspect meals in the future, they are going to measure to make sure you're serving enough grains, because now they've got something to help them with it. I did get into a short conversation with Kentucky Department of Education. We bumped heads going back and forth a little bit. They sent out a memo that said, for Kentucky providers, you must hold on to and send in your grain food labels or your ounce equivalent labels. So I went back to them and what we said to them was, look, ounce equivalent is just a serving size. There is nothing on that label except information to help you do the calculation that's any value to us. And so tell them it made no sense to make providers send in every label from every grain product they ever serve from this point forward. So they backed off of that position and asked then, if we're not going to do that, then what are we going to do? I tell them, this is our process. And I'm talking about Kentucky, but for Tennessee also. If you're serving a meal, if it's an item that's on the cheat sheet, then go ahead and serve your meal. If we see you're serving a bagel or Cheez-Its, we can take out the cheat sheet and make sure you served enough. If you're serving something that's not on this cheat sheet, you need to hold onto that label at least until that meal is done. Because if we were to come in and see that item, or the state, Tennessee or Kentucky came in, and the item's not on the cheat sheet, they're going to need that label to do the calculation. All right, so you don't need to send it in to us. Just make sure you hold on to that label at least until that meal is done. So that was the agreement I made with the state of Kentucky. And we'll make sure we put this in front of everyone in writing. And then Tennessee, we're going to follow the same process. So far, DHS has been kind of quiet on how they're going to enforce this. But I'm willing to bet they're going to take the same approach.